Hello. I'm so excited. Tuesday's like my favorite day. Thank you guys for being here. And for all of you in the audience, welcome to Tuesdays with Audra. It's a live stream show where we sit down with individuals and business owners in our community and get an unfiltered and unscripted look at what they're doing on the day-to-day to move themselves and their businesses forward in some really uncharted territory. I'm your host, Audra Fournier. I'm a local business owner, publisher, certified professional life and master business coach, and really just a curious person. So Christy Souders is our publisher or the producer of the show. And she's the number one reason that I got into this, and highly, highly helpful. If you guys are looking for live stream or a way to get your message out, Christy is certainly the person to go to. Thank you for being with us, Christy. She's super
excited for today's show.
I am too. She's going to pop in the back to make sure that we get all your questions answered. So make sure that you put them in the chat boxes, and she'll make sure that they'll pop up here on the bottom of the show, and we can get those answered. Any questions that you have for Kelly today? So I'm excited to introduce Kelly Otte. She is campaigning through the craziest economic and social situation that's out there for Leon County Commissioner at Large, Group 1. Welcome, Kelly.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
Me too. And, you know, I've had quite a few people on the show that I know, and I'm excited to get to know you today.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So give our audience kind of a background of, you in Tallahassee and how you got into this and decided to run for commissioner.
So I moved to Leon County 25 years ago to take the position as the executive director of Refuge House, which is the domestic violence and sexual assault program here. Mm-hmm. And we came to town with a 16-month-old. My son was 16 months old, and fell in love with this community as I wanted my children to have a hometown. I didn't have one growing up, so I wanted them to have one. And so it worked out beautifully that we fell in love with the community, and there was such great work that I could do here. So I stayed at Refuge House for 10 years. I left there because I was completely burnt out. I just burnt out, needed to take a break. So I went into private consulting for a little while, did mostly worked with nonprofits, boards of directors, did a lot of work out of the area and out of state even. Mm-hmm. And then started working with a group of people to turn the United Partners for Human Services into more than just a group of association where we met monthly and just talked about what was going on with the human services sector. We turned it into an actual 501c3 and an organization. So I was their first executive director. And while I was there, I created the Oasis Center for Women and Girls. Mm-hmm. So we created Oasis in 2007. I was able to stay there until 2011 by supplementing my income. I taught at FSU. I was still doing consulting. But my son was getting ready to go into high school or into college. And I really wanted him to have a different experience than I had. So I wanted him to go to school and not have to worry about everything. So I felt like I really needed to have a full-time paying job. And right then I got this beautiful opportunity to go to Pace Center for Girls, which just fit with everything that I believed anyways. So I was there for 9.5 years. I just left 3 weeks ago.
Wow.
So, yeah, that's kind of a nutshell. I've done a lot of things on a volunteer basis, but professionally, that's kind of been the route that I've taken.
There's so much wrapped up in that whole discussion. I have a huge place in my heart for Pace Center for Girls, and I have a good friend that's been on the board down in Hillsborough County for many years, and participated in some of the fundraising and things that she really, and the stories that she tells me and the impact that the girls have made on her life has been pretty incredible. It's certainly a much needed space for young girls to go.
Yeah, it's very important.
So random kind of question. What would you say that you've learned from all of this nonprofit work that you can apply to the seat that you're running for?
So much, but what got me into nonprofit work was actually my passion for social justice and social change, because I really wanted the world to be different, particularly for women and girls. And I decided to go the route of nonprofits because I was told pretty emphatically by many of my mentors that I'd have more freedom in nonprofits to do the kind of social change work that I wanted to do. And so I took them at their word. But what was interesting is when I became the executive director of Refuge House, I'd never done anything other than worked on a hotline in a domestic violence program. I'd never managed people. I had a graduate degree that did not teach me how to run a nonprofit, but I got hired. And in the first 18 months, what almost imploded was my lack of understanding of the nonprofit management sector, the part of the job where you actually had to have your professional hat on and manage people. Mm-hmm. So I became a student of nonprofits then. Up until that point, it was just social justice and social change and service delivery. And once I realized that I really needed to understand nonprofits, I really started to understand the power of the connectedness of nonprofits, in particular, all of them as a sector, but in particular, when human service organizations work together, mm-hmm. what can get done. Like, we're so powerful as long as we're working together. The net is so much wider. And so I learned the power of working with government, the ability to change things that were entrenched. I worked on the statewide legislation to take guns out of the hands of batterers. So when they'd get a domestic violence injunction, it was still legal for them to have their guns. But we had a woman here in Tallahassee who was murdered in a parking lot of a Publix by her husband, who had an active injunction, but he had a rifle in his truck. So we got legislation passed to take guns away from batterers. And through that process, I really learned what it meant to advocate for change in sort of institutions that were so entrenched in the way they looked at things. And so I had to develop a less single mindset about, I'm an activist and this is the only thing that this is the only answer that can happen, and to learn how to do things incrementally in partnership. And meaning that sometimes you had to make concessions in order to make gains. And to me, that's government. I mean, that's the process of politics and government. So what finally, about 5 years ago, somebody suggested that I run for public office. And people used to say it all the time, but I'd laugh it off. This time, the person who said it was Andrew Gillum, and it was incredibly motivating to me. I could not believe that he saw me in that light. I know now that the research says that women have to be asked directly to consider running, or they won't necessarily see themselves in that role. And so he asked me directly, and it changed it was so weird, but I was right there with the statistics. Like, he said it, and all of a sudden I was saying, maybe it is possible, and maybe I could make even bigger change than what I'm making in these nonprofits by doing that. So 5 years ago, I started to think about it. 3 years ago, my father got really sick, and he declined so rapidly on a restricted income that there was no housing for him in Leon County. And so we couldn't find beds for him anywhere. I had to beg, borrow, and steal to get him into places, and recognize the privilege that I was exerting to do that. But it shouldn't have been that hard, and it shouldn't be that hard for other seniors. So the night he died, my sister and I were actually sitting in the room with him while we were waiting for the funeral home to come. And my brother is a minister. My brother-in-law is a minister, and he lives in California. And so we actually called him, and he did it was 2:00 in the morning there, and he actually stopped everything and did prayer over my dad via the phone. And while that was happening in my head, all I could think was, I have to make it different. I have to do something, or this won't have meant anything. And so on the spot, I committed to him that I would do something big to try to address the lack of beds, for affordable beds. And so that was it. After that, I started trying to figure out how and where and when, and I had no idea how to do it. And so, and putting together the right team and all of that. But yeah, that's how it happened.
And it takes a village.
It does.
I love Barbie is participating. She said hi, and then the lack of affordable housing is and assisted living for elderly is insane. This is definitely something top of mind for many of us with aging parents, and that's absolutely true. Mm-hmm. It is a difficult situation, and it's the affordability, I think, part of it, because you see assisted living going up everywhere, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the masses can afford to live in.
They can't.
And it's like $350,000 to $400,000 homes are popping up everywhere, but where's the $150,000 to $200,000 homes, which are starter homes for most of the people that can afford to buy their first house?
Yes. I'm totally with you. And the expense of it was what was crazy. But the thing that really got to me the most was I was very fortunate, and Tapestry assisted living had just really opened in town. Now they have 3 sites, but they had empty beds because they were new. So they offered to let him come in at a reduced cost for a few months. And to me, that was really life-changing. And the reason why is because his quality of life went from almost nothing to really high overnight. It's like, I went in to see him too. I'd seen him pretty much every day, but on the second day after he'd gotten into Tapestry, he was sitting in the cocktail. They had like cocktail hour going, and he was sitting with another guy, and they were chewing the fat and doing all that stuff that, they do. And his quality of life went up. The staff there was super engaging with him. He had jokes that he told 100 times to all of us that he could say again, and they'd never heard them. And
right.
I mean, his quality of life just skyrocketed. And when we told him, he stayed there for, we were able to afford 2 months. And then when we told him we really were going to have to move him somewhere else because we couldn't afford to pay the rate, he understood, but he was super disappointed. And he died, I think like 6 weeks later. And his quality of, and I'm not saying that because he couldn't live in a quality place, it killed him, but I am saying it contributed to it. Right. Because his quality of life plummeted. And they put him in a nursing home. It was like a rehab, but it was really a nursing home. And it was awful. And we couldn't figure out what to do with him. People wouldn't even talk to me on the phone. I'd call them, and the minute they heard he was Medicare with Medicaid pending, they would just say, we have no beds. We have no beds. Or we have a bed, but you're going to have to pay $6,500 a month. It was ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we definitely need to do better.
Jean reminded us that not only do we have aging parents, we are also aging ourselves. And being knowledgeable about the services and resources that exist is difficult with, it's ever changing, and some services are offered and some are then stopped being offered. Thank you, Kelly. Mandy Lou says sometimes things aren't even on our radar until they affect us or our family. It's absolutely true.
Yeah.
A couple of the things that you mentioned that I kind of wanted to go back to was compromise or concessions. I was watching a show the other day on Netflix, obviously, because we all watch that. But it was about how the transition of Sweden over the last, 5 or 6 decades was about getting both sides to the table. And I think that we're so opposed on so many different things that even getting people to the table to have the discussion, to be able to compromise. What are your thoughts on that for Tallahassee?
It's really interesting, but I had something happen just this morning that reminded me how narrow people are in the way that they judge each other. Like it was a litmus test. It's like one thing and I don't measure up, so therefore I'm garbage. It's not even that politely I'll decline to vote for you. It is you're garbage and I knew you were garbage and all this kind of stuff. And that is not new to me. That's happened to me the whole time I've been doing social change work, because I've never been
A yes man.
I've never been the person that the people who are doing litmus tests want, the people on the left or the right. And so I've experienced that pretty much my entire professional career. And the way that I reconcile that is that I need to do what is right after I've done the research and after I have talked to people on all sides of the issue. And so to me, it means actively listening to each other, that we have to have a way where we get with the people who are willing to not call people names or to tell you that you're garbage, but sit at a table, maybe be passionate, because I don't mind that. And I certainly don't mind people being mad at me, but being at a table and being able to talk things through, I think is imperative. So I said this the other day that, well, one of the things that I've committed to doing is listening sessions in all 6 districts 4 times a year, so every quarter. And I call them listening sessions because I'm not going to go and present what we're doing in the county, although I'm sure that will be a part of it. I want to hear what it is that they want from the county, or what road they're having trouble with, or, you know, who they're mad at this week about the garbage not being picked up. I want to hear those things. And that means that the people I need to hear from the most are the ones that I may have the least in common with, because I may not already understand their issues. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So to me, that's how you get people to both sides of the table, is willingness. Like, I've had some really amazing conversations with people since I started running, who posted things on my Facebook page that were like anti-me. Like, they would say something, not mean, but say something like, well, this is why I'd never vote for you. And then I'd put my phone number down and say, call me. And I've had like 4 or 5 of those conversations where they lasted like an hour. They were super great. I didn't ask them to vote for me. That wasn't the reason. What I wanted to hear and understand was, what is it that they heard or read or saw that made them think I was not open and available to them. And so as many opportunities as we can to challenge people's preconceived perceptions. And I think I've had that happen so much in my adult life, where I've stereotyped somebody and then found out that isn't who they were. The other thing I cannot stand is in the campaign, that's just really hard for me, it's really sad for me, are the people who are trying to vote only for expertise in like one area. And I don't think you can do that, because the commissioners, there is no one on the planet that's going to come into the commission office and be an expert on everything that the commission does. That's ridiculous. That expectation is ridiculous. So the litmus test on, if you're going to have a litmus test, you're going to have, well, everybody has a test to decide on whether you're going to vote. It's got to be on the content of your character and your qualifications and your ability to learn, right? Yeah. You want to know, is somebody going to ask questions? Is somebody going to listen to me? Is somebody sort of aligned with my general philosophy around the world? But the expectation that people are supposed to be experts is just, that's my garbage back at them. That's just garbage.
Yeah. I love all of the comments that are coming in about active listening and building bridges. Thank you, Yolanda, for that one. Barbie has a question, I think. I've never considered elected officials as expert, but more so servant leaders. What do you consider yourself an expert on, and how important is expertise in the role of a commissioner?
I think the thing that I consider myself an expert on is sort of the process of social change and how it happens and how slow it is, but like that process. And when I was a young advocate, like, it was never enough. Like, I listen to the young activists now and I just love them. Their energy is so amazing. But I remember being in their shoes and thinking it was never enough. The house was burning down and we had to fix it right then. Right. And what I've learned, I think, as I've done it for longer, is that sometimes you really are only going to be able to get to the first step out of the 10 steps that have to happen to get something. So we have to be willing to celebrate progress. So I definitely, I think myself an expert on that. I think I'm an expert on nonprofit management. I certainly have a gazillion years of experience now working with boards of directors. And the way I think that holds me in good stead with the commission is that I believe I'm the only one that served on more than like 1 or 2 boards of directors. I'm not trying to put everybody else down. I just think that's true. And I've served on or worked with in my consulting business or even volunteered for probably over 60 of them. And so that means that I have a pretty strong understanding of what the policy making group does and what the implementation job is for the staff. And so I feel like I'm coming in sort of certainly not having figured it all out, or not that I won't be looking like a deer in the headlights sometimes, but I understand what policy making means as opposed to being an expert on a staff's job and telling them how to do their job. That is definitely a boundary.
And I think that that's a very understandable lateral, because when you're used to working with a board, transitioning that into like a political team is not much different. You're still needing the buy-in of all the people around you, and you're needing to be able to be convicted in how you feel about, you know, what progress should be, in an effort to explain that and educate others about the process. And so it takes a lot of leadership when it comes to running nonprofits and working with boards. And I think that that's a good lateral to needing those same skill sets in an effort to work with all of the other people in your political team.
Yeah. And one of the things about my background that surprises people is that before I got to Leon County, I actually, I've worked in the federal government. I worked for the Bureau of Land Management for 5 years when I lived in Nevada. I've worked in commercial real estate twice, once for a company that was a shopping center developer, a national shopping center developer. And I worked in their asset management department, which actually was like the property managers of these billions of hotels or shopping centers and office buildings. And then I also worked for a commercial real estate company that was more locally based, which was in Sarasota. And then spent 3 years working for Chris Craft Boats, which is a manufacturing company. And so I was late to school. I didn't go to college till I was 25. And I had a lot of time to see how the world sort of functioned in other sectors. So I do have an expertise on nonprofits, but I didn't actually start managing one until I was how old was I? 34. I was 34 or 35 when I moved here. And up until then, I had all these other ranging experiences that have also really led me to where I am. Like, one of the things I tell people all the time is that I grew up out west, where property rights and water rights are worth killing people over, especially in the ranching community. And so my sister is married to a 3rd-generation cattle rancher in the mountains in 𝐒𝐿𝐭, Nevada. And her and all of her friends voted for Trump. And I understand why they did it. So what I've said to her before is, I may not be politically aligned with you in a lot of different things, but I'm willing to understand why. And so I understand why.
That is a huge thing. I'm sorry to interrupt you right there. We don't always, as a coach, as a friend, I'm on boards for nonprofits as well. As a human, we don't have to agree with each other, but being able to understand the perspective of somebody else and why they came about that opinion is the most powerful thing.
Yes.
Because,
yes.
You know, I may or may not vote for a certain person, but I don't hate them. I mean, I understand where they're coming from. I understand that all of the experiences that they've had up until this point has put them in this place where they have these beliefs, and that's okay. I just don't agree.
Yes. And I'm not going to support them to be that way, but I'm not going to challenge their right. Now, I'm saying this wrong, because I actually do challenge a lot of people in the way they think about things. So I'm going down the wrong road.
I'm not going to think less of them because they have that opinion, like they're entitled to that opinion. That is their free will, their freedom of speech, their, you know.
Yes. I think too, especially, I've done a lot of anti-racism work over the last, when I started working in domestic violence and I started to understand the systemic oppression issues that are attached to domestic violence, why it's women that are beaten, and in the level that they are, that I started to realize that there were oppression issues even within that oppression issue. Like for Black women, it was very different.
And there's like gradients of it.
Yeah.
And Barbie, you're right. It is like a unicorn. I love to see all the comments coming in. Ashley's like, yes, yes. And Barbie's like, civility. Margot Arma said, being able to understand and accept a person's right to have a different opinion is important.
Yes, but no, too, I don't know you, Margot. I don't think I do. I hate to say that, but I've met a lot of people. But what I will say to you is there's a cost to being willing to listen to other people's opinions, because there are people that will only think one particular way, the right or the left. And so if you try to do anything that looks like you're not going to stay in that lane, there's a political cost to you and a social cost to you because of the way people sort of label you. And because I've done so much, I want to bring it back to what I was saying about anti-racism work. I'm incredibly clear that as an elected person, we can't make all of the decisions for communities, especially if I'm white, for communities of color, without the communities of color being represented at the decision-making table in whatever form that takes.
Right.
Because the experiences and the perspectives are so different than what I grew up with and what I see, that I can't assume that I know, no matter how good I am at trying to be the best anti-racist person I can be, I cannot assume that I actually understand the perspective. And so, I just feel like we have to be open. We have to be open to listening, and we have to be open to at least challenging our own views so that we're not super narrow-minded. Because I don't want it. Now, I have a thing, though. Once I have made up my mind, then I've made up my mind. And if it's something that's a deep-seated belief for me, then it is my belief. But for a lot of different reasons, I want to be able to hear. And so just, I don't think,
again, inviting them all to the table to learn their perspective, to get their input, especially if it's impacting their micro communities and things like that. Opening the table, building the bridges, as Yolanda said. What would you say is your passion platform or project for your campaign? And I think I may have, did I lose her?
Yeah, but Kelly, she's very familiar with this platform. So
she'll jump back in. Oh, I'm having so much fun with this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
All the comments and everybody's participating.
I don't know what that was. That literally just blew my mind. Yeah, that's so weird. And now you're on the other side. I don't know how that happened. Sorry about that.
That's okay. So I was asking, what is your kind of passion project or platform for your campaign? Do you have a couple of things that you're extraordinarily passionate about, whether it be women's rights, because you did a lot of work with PACE and Refuge House, or maybe even one change that you would like to see in Tallahassee, and that's kind of one of the things that is pushing your campaign forward?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that I want to be able to work on, but there are three particular things that I want to make sure I can see happened when I leave, or that started, not finished, but started. Right. One is that I want to see us approaching poverty from a collective impact model, because what we're doing now is that people with great ideas are popping up and creating great energy around a particular community, around a particular idea. And that's awesome, but I liken it to popcorn. It like pops up all over the place. And collective impact, what it does is try to develop a process or a model to capture that and make it the community's model for how we're going to reduce poverty in our community. And so I want to know that collective impact was adopted and that we've set up a process for how to make sure that that's effective. So one of the things I'd love to see is a collective impact office or a collective impact officer in the county whose job really is to support the community activists and advocates right now who are trying to get that started. So I'm very passionate about that. Interestingly enough, I'm also very passionate about reducing crime, because people need to understand that we've made a decision in this county over the past number of years, however many, that we are willing to put up 50%, almost 50% of our county budget up for locking people up and incarcerating them, arresting them. For the criminal justice system, for law enforcement in the jail is 47% of our budget, which means that as people, we have decided that crime and incarceration is half of what matters to us in this community. So I think we've lost our way. I started in the 80s. It's not really Leon County's fault. It was a philosophy of get tougher, get tougher, get tougher, and they're going to stop doing it. It hasn't worked. And the jails are all being overrun. So it's not working. So I want to see a lot more investment in prevention programs. But that's also part of collective impact as well, that make a commitment, a long-term commitment to see what happens when we invest in preventing crime at a level that is comparable to incarcerating people. And so I would like to see that conversation have changed a little bit. I'm a rider. I have a horse, and I spend my way of decompressing with the world is to ride by myself in one of our parks, especially under the beautiful trees, all alone and in the quiet. And so I have a connection to other horse people in the community. And I want us to embrace equine tourism in Leon County. It is a multi-billion-dollar national revenue stream. And we have some of the most beautiful trail systems, state and county, here in this community. And we can definitely pull people in to come here and use them. So I want to build an indoor arena at the fairgrounds where along with boarding facilities, because out west I went to Yellowstone a few years ago with 𝐂𝐤𝐿 from Tallahassee, and we met my sister and her friend who had hauled horses in. Well, we met them at a fairgrounds, because in the fairgrounds out west where they cater to equine people, you can pull a trailer into the fairgrounds, pay a fee, turn your horses out into a boarding facility, into a stall, and hook your RV up and stay there. So I want that. So, and then the other thing is around, I want to see an assisted living facility that is not-for-profit starts here in this town, that provides assisted living, that quality of life that I craved from my dad, and for my dad. And I want to see that we've got beds coming for people on restricted incomes. And we need to fight as a county to get the state to accept the expanded Medicaid, because they have really hurt people by refusing to take the federal government's additional support in Medicaid. And it's hurting us, it's hurting the people that live here, and we have to be willing to do that. So I want to be able to share and support any efforts to encourage the state to do that.
Wow, those all kind of speak back to everything that we've talked about over the last 30 minutes. And I never even knew about equine tourism, but I know, horse people in my family, and I never knew about that. That's so interesting.
Yeah.
How can people find you, communicate with you, interact with you, figure out where you're going to be and how your campaign's going?
Well, somebody's scrolling on my Facebook page. Can everybody see that? Not just me?
Yes, that's Chrissy doing her magic in the background, sharing your Facebook page with.
There's my dad right there, by the way. That's my dad on the day I got married, and then that's that's me holding his hand right before he died, a couple of weeks before he died. And the reason why I posted the thing about his hand was because that hand held me and made it okay for me to be okay. And when it was his time and he needed all of us to help him, there just wasn't any. So I love that picture. The way that you can help is go to Facebook. All of the position statements are on there. I have this really amazing, one of the things is I have an all volunteer team. So I have the leadership on my team is all volunteer. And so they're doing it because they believe in me, which I think is really amazing. And they were all people that I knew before, which I think is even more amazing, that they believe in me at the level that they do. So they do all of this. I don't do any of this. And
that's amazing.
Yeah.
What a great team. And what a great feeling to know that, you have an amazing support team behind you that's
it's very,
cheering you on.
But if people would go there and check out, they can see the position statements. They can see who's endorsed me. There's a lot of really incredible people that have endorsed me. I have a website too. It's 𝐂𝐨𝐿.com. We're only 12 days or something ridiculous, 13 days away from the primary, from the actual date. And so I need people to vote for me. We're still taking donations, even though it's this close. There's a lot of last minute things we're trying to get done. So you can contribute up to $250. We're looking for volunteers to wave signs, which according to yesterday was super fun for people, but standing at the polling places, being on street corners, waving signs. So especially outgoing people, they really like it. But those are the big things. And then reaching out to me if you have a comment or an idea, something you want to make sure that I know about. I'm pretty sure this election's going to go to a runoff just because there's 7 of us in the race. So it'd be hard not to. I want to be one of the 2 that gets into the runoff. That's what I'm working for right now. So please vote.
I love you. Last on the ballot, first for community.
Yeah,
all of that scroll up underneath.
Yeah. She's funny.
This has been so wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your story and your experience and your passions with me and with the community. It's just been a delight to have you on the show. Is there anything that you want to that we've kind of left out that you wanted to address?
I really am emphasizing with people that they have to look at the candidates and the investment that we had in the community before we decided to run. That's super important. So I want people to ask those questions. So when somebody says they started volunteering a year ago, I don't understand how people see that as an investment in the community. So I really want people to look at the long-term records. And I'm not trying to put other people down. What I'm saying is I've been right here. I've done so much, both as a volunteer and in the professional work that I've done. All I'm really trying to do right now is continue to do that, invest in the community, but at a greater platform. That's it. I just want to do more of the same thing that I've been doing, but from a higher level and expand it, because I'm going to be reaching into areas that I've never been able to work in before. And I'm excited about that. And what I promise to do is serve with passion, with restraint sometimes, until I can have all the information and being thoughtful about decisions that are being made. So yeah, thanks for that. And thanks for having me. Super fun. I could just talk. I just like to talk to people.
That's okay. I like to listen. We're active listening. We're having a listening conversation.
Yeah, that's great. Good. Thank you.
Most of the time I'm talking, so it's good to learn from others out in my community and figure out what their passions are.
True.
So it has been a delight. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank
you, Chrissy, for making sure that all of the fun comments are coming through. And thank you, Barbie, for making so many comments. She's really getting involved in this conversation.
I'm an expert at making good trouble. I like that.
Yes, absolutely. All right, so that's our show for today. Make sure that you like our Facebook page, find Kelly, and get involved in her campaign and learn more about her. If you have any coaching questions, please message or call me. If you would like to nominate yourself or someone else to be on the show, please do send us an email at tuesdayswithaudra@gmail.com. And see us next week for same time, same place, Tuesday at noon. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you.